last composer or last duo of artists actually in this case. Today is Rachel and Autumn. Welcome and thank you for being in TRAIECT and thank you for being here. Your piece is called The Space in Between, but it has a huge Chinese text or really really, we will come to that quickly. Really old in text. And first of all, is this already for you a play between like the new and the tradition, or how do you come to that title?
Well, actually, Rachel gave me a text on Zhao Jun Hefan, Zhao Jun marrying to the frontier, as the base that she wants to work on. So I kind of started researching on the text to see what we can do with the text to develop something about the concept for this particular character in the script that she gave me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the title acknowledges maybe these historical gaps in the story, but also maybe, relating to Wang Jiaotun, this idea of kind of also physical gaps with distances between cultures and stories and what's transmitted.
So you're both working with this ancient story. Can you please, because I'm also not entirely. So just basically, what is happening in this story, and what did you make out of it?
Okay, so for the script itself, it's about Wang Zhaojun, this woman from the Han Dynasty, and she was married to the barbarians by the Han Emperor. And in the script that I received, it mentioned her being painted ugly in the painting of her for the emperor, and that's why she is selected to be chosen to marry off to the frontier and not staying by the emperor. But also it mentions her pipa elegy that she played when she was traveling to the outer part of the countryside. So this story is historically recorded in the Book of Han and also in the Book of Later Han. And basically, I just read some of the parts that describes for the Book of Han. It mentions that she is a really beautiful person and she was married to the frontier. And for the Book of Later Han, it mentions that she wanted to go back to the Han Dynasty because her husband died, and she was a little forced to marry her son, which she didn't want to. But then the emperor told her that she has to stay in the frontier, and that is the end of her own records, of the records of this character in the story. And it is to me interesting that this woman is a woman. She doesn't really have a correct name in the historical context. She doesn't have her own name in the historical context. And with the historical context, it is the male historians who wrote her story and to describe her as a peace token between China and the barbarians. And she maintained peace for hundreds of years. And that is probably the main purpose of this character in the history of Han Dynasty. So I was just wondering, what is her own voice? And even though she doesn't have a voice herself, a lot of other people wrote about her. There are fables about her. There are a lot of other interpretations about her, music, theater. But exactly what is she about, we don't really know. It is like she is like a painting herself and ready to be interpreted by the other people. So I just want to do something for this character to say like, well, in historical context, she is alone and she is silent, but there are still women who experiences the same nostalgia that she has experienced, and women who write about their hometown in the present. So I kind of played with the words of the theatrical script that I received and merged in some of the other contexts of other women who also write about their hometown, and they are contemporary Taiwanese writers, and also some works that male writers write about her for her image, and kind of merge this into an image that at the same time is her, but is not her. But it is an image of her that might be extended from the story itself.
Okay. So I find it very interesting because we have like two different collaborations here. First of all, between you two. So Rachel, of course, you write the music, but if I said to Autumn, please write me the text. And as I understand it correctly, you gave her the really basic idea. This is what I want the piece to be about. Did I understand it correctly? And second is, of course, the work with the instrumentalists. So Rachel, for you, what was the most like when you encountered this music? How was it for you? What elements did you pick up on, and did you want to work on, or did you go with the flow?
Yeah, I guess for me, I mean, I guess I should say I have a kind of a background a little bit studying Chinese music, and I had done part of my undergraduate and then also a master's degree in China. So focusing on Chinese traditional music. And I'd also done some earlier research in Taiwan on Nangua music. So it was a little bit within my domain. But when I heard Yu Xiu's performance, I was remembered actually of when I was studying Peking opera in Beijing. And I'd taken a few classes on composing that. So I was kind of brought back to this space and this memory of that. So yeah, I was interested, I think, to explore maybe a little bit more of the this storytelling lens, which I think also connects back to other work that I've done with Autumn. Pieces where the performer is also telling a story, so you're maybe singing and playing. We had done a piece in 2019, kind of connected to Nangua music, actually. Also, that was a mix of dialects, which is actually why I thought to work with Autumn on this project, because we had done a project about another Taiwanese music in a dialect that was also about storytelling and singing and playing. So it seemed like an extension of that.
So for you, for working this close with the artists, you already mentioned you had a lot of impact. Is this? Did you have some project like this before? I mean, you two worked before, but like really talking about the instrumentalists right now. Did you have some projects like this before, or was this your first like this experience, and how was it for you?
No, I would say actually it's my normal way of working.
Okay.
Is to really do kind of quite an extensive research process over that specific instrument, and whether it's it doesn't matter where that instrument comes from. I think it's I mean, I really do go to my own room and I compose the music, but I spend a lot of time, like when I first moved to China in 2015, at that point I spent maybe almost a year researching pipa, and in that time I was meeting with my performer 1 or 2 times a week, and I was sitting on the floor of her living room and just listening to her practice, shadowing all of her concerts, making recording. I mean, it was kind of a long process, and then I began doing this process kind of at the same time I was composing other pieces and kind of building up this memory bank and this, I guess, repository of knowledge. And sometimes that takes a few years to actually result in a piece. But I would say, for me, it's important, I think, to have this this understanding of maybe what the historical context of an instrument is, but also not limiting one's musical imagination to that, but using that research as a foundation to find new sounds and new expressive possibilities.
So just, you already mentioned it, and this question goes to both of you. What new things do you want to discover? What new things do you want to bring forth in this piece? Maybe I start with you, Autumn, if that's okay. So you have the text. Is there something you already mentioned? Okay, it's a woman who does not have a face on its own and stuff like that. And maybe, is this the theme that you wanted to explore, or which theme did you explore or wanted to explore in this?
I think for my own part of the research, I really want to explore how her voice could be. Since she is a silent figure herself, I have to explore it with other sources and to try to picture something that I think is similar to her voice. But I think it is also interesting working with the instrumentalists that they're using Gonghua for their music. And I learned a lot from their text and also the language, the dialect. I think it is something new for me. That's what I explored and discovered within the process.
Yeah, and I think also that language also brings us into different types of musical spaces. No, I mean, it really does, I think, and especially when you're starting to deal with different types of dialects in Chinese. I mean, I was giving a talk online earlier in Beijing today about a different piece that was also in a dialect, and it was about this exact theme, that actually the space, I kind of compared it then to, like, if you're like looking at a field or something, and you have maybe like a pair of sunglasses on, and then you take the sunglasses off, and you see that the topography of the field is quite different. I mean, with Chinese you can read a text, but then if you hear it in the dialect, it has a very different impression of what maybe even the text could mean, or what the feeling of it is, the expressive nature of it. And I think in this case, the Guanhua does add a very specific feeling. But I guess in terms of new elements, I mean, there was a lot of new elements, I mean, combined with old elements. I mean, for me, actually, maybe this is an exception, but I was actually very comfortable with Chinese instruments, but this was my first piece to use electronics. Okay. So that was a new element for me. And I made a little bit of a research process with the Moog synthesizer in the electronic studio in Hannover. And then I was combining that with voice recitation from Autumn and from Yuxiu and Titian. So you hear that also in the electronics as well as in the live parts. But I would also say one thing that was both new and old for me was the notation. I mean, I wanted something where I felt like the musicians could be kind of like a spinning mobile on top of the electronics, and something that would give them freedom to be expressive within their own sense of time, but something that was actually quite strict and precise. So I came to using, I guess back to my studies of Beijing opera, I mean, there's a type of theater notation, or there's a lot of different types of theater notation, but I modified a form of gongshupu, the theater notation, adding additional parameters for timbre and within kind of relational time zones, so that there would be a sense of of a little bit more flexibility in what I could get from the voices. I mean, it takes time, I think, always to find a notation that's suitable for the project at hand. So there was a lot of different factors in this piece. I mean, also for me, I mean, something that's new was, I mean, Autumn wrote the text, but I had to also learn it, and not just learn to, I mean, okay, I have to read it, but also to memorize the pronunciation myself and be able to recite it myself, and to learn how to do it. It's also kind of a little bit of a process.
I wanted to ask at this point also, like, did I get the process right? So you said the initial theme, let's say, okay, then you got deep into the literature and wrote the text, and then you tried to, again, put it into sound, or was this a combined, or did you also have something to do with the sound? How can I imagine this collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, I had this idea of I mean, the story of Wong Chong-tun is all over in history, but it's also specifically in the Big One repertoire. There's quite a few songs about her. So I had found the score via Yusio and had passed that on to Autumn and said I would like to focus on this theme. You had done the research in historical sources, making kind of a collage between them, living writers, also your own story. And then when I got it back, it's kind of like a script, and then some parts of it actually are also kind of erased, and some parts, because the grammar of Guanhua is a little different. So there's certain words that you could write in Mandarin, but when we change the text a little bit to Guanhua, then you get also this this blurring of the space in between. And then I guess when I got the text, I had an idea for how I wanted to use the voice combined with the synthesizer. So then it kind of went back to sound because I asked Autumn and the two musicians to make voice recordings of them reading the text normally, of reciting it in different ways, some of which I notated, some of which I asked them to do freely. And also because in the text there's different characters. So different historical sources, because in the more theatrical music of Beiguan, you have the possibility of very different voice types, male voices, female voices, different roles, and you get very different sounds based on that. So in the story, based on Autumn's characterization from the different sources, and then how I composed it, you have to do very, very rapid switching between the different opera prototypes, or I'm not finding the right word here. So in this case, there was a little bit back and forth as you were recording the sound. But the compositional part was kind of more, the sonic part, I guess, was more, I go away and write my score and then hand it back to people. So.
Okay. So there's a lot of time happening in between, like, because in 2020 and your piece, did you collaborate in the meantime again and so far by now, or are you planning to do another project?
Yeah, so I guess for us we had kind of, really started, I think you'd finished the text around March 2020, was that about right, or April 2020? Yeah, I think it was around March, okay. And then I think I'd finished the score kind of around the end of June, and then I'd finished the electronics maybe by the end of August. It was premiered in Taiwan in September 2020. So, and then in the meantime, we've had other things, but I think also for us that it's it's also interesting getting to hear the piece, because I haven't heard it live before. But also you've heard it live, but it's a little different, and just in a different space, even a different room, a different musician. But we are working on the next thing. It's just that it's I don't know. Sometimes it's a very long process, even having kind of a direction, a theme, an instrumentation, trying to figure out how to frame things, or not to frame things. We were talking about this today. But it's also, it's funny because we've been in separate places. The last time we saw each other was February 2020, because Autumn came to Hannover, so we could see the Sprengel Museum, so we could kind of do a little bit of testing the acoustics for the piece. And then we didn't know Corona would happen. And then this is the first time we see each other after all that. So it's also just very different getting to talk about a project or a piece in the same room and have that feel for collaboration. It's very different than on Zoom. So. Okay.
For in between, are there so far any questions for now? Yeah, please.
My question is for Autumn. Sorry, Rachel, but I already heard the story from your perspective. And how it was for you? How is it like to work with your culture, with an artist that comes from? And I think that the question is also like it's possible also with the artists that are gonna play, but they were not on the Pune. But how is it to work with your culture or something like it? It's near you with someone who comes from another culture. If you found something particularly interesting or some views that you maybe hadn't got before, or what?
Actually, it is interesting to answer whether this is my culture or not, because I think Beiguan is particularly a culture itself, and I'm basically also an observer and a collaborator with Beiguan. So really it's 3 cultures in one piece, probably. Yeah, for me it's like this. And I did kind of put my own thoughts and put some of the text that I've learned from before in this piece, and probably I can say that this is my culture, but also just part of my own identity merged in this piece.
Yes. So about like one last question from my perspective. If you so you recorded yourself, so you also
there's a story about this.
Okay.
I'd asked her. This is really embarrassing. I'd asked Autumn to send me some voice recordings, but like, I think I said that I was going to put them in the electronics, but I think you thought maybe it was like a test version or something, so you recorded it kind of like really in the morning without coffee, like you were like really tired and stuff, and then she was in the concert in the actual hall, and she was like, oh no, she used that recording. It's like you at 8 a.m. being like, trying to remember these obscure, like some of these characters are really obscure, really obscure.
I actually double-checked the pronunciation.
Yeah, so no, the text for this piece was very difficult actually, even for both of us. So, so she did record her voice, but it ended up being in a place she didn't expect it to be.
Okay. And you also had to use how many different dialects again?
Just Guanhua and Chinese, but because I used the historical context of Wang Zhaoqun, so it's like ancient Chinese. It's not the way that we talk currently, and Chinese 50 years ago is also a little different from Chinese now. So,
just the grammatical construction, and I think what makes it difficult is like in classical Chinese, you would say a lot more with a lot less. So sometimes the characters, there's kind of like a bit of interpreting that needs to happen because they've kind of weaned it to this very lean form, and also because some of the characters are not very, and part of it is the subject matter. There's just some very specific words that you just don't see, and then part of it is also just that the language itself was has just changed so much. But also in general, I think there's a very big gap between spoken language and like high Hock Chinesisch. Like, it's different.
So step 3, so to say, is like because I think it's a huge difference. You have text which you write, and then you record it yourself as a kind of in my simple words, like a theater play. How was for you the difference between the written text or the thoughts you put into the written text and then making this recording, making the sounds out of it?
Well, you come from a theater background, maybe that's important to say.
Okay.
Yeah, but to me this time is really more about the text and understanding the text itself, and also with Guanhua, because I don't really know Guanhua, so I have to discuss with the instrumentalist a lot about Guanhua, and with the text itself, I just need to basically just check the meaning and understand what I specifically want to say, even though that it will be obscured in the end. But during the process, I have to make sure that I'm on the right path of what I'm trying to say, because or else it will be just totally a mess. So to me, it's more about that.
Okay. So one last for me understanding question. Did you write the text to be like spoken word, or did you write the text and make it in spoken, so to say?
Okay.
Which was your main focus here?
Okay. To make it into a spoken, I think it is more of a Rachel's process to work. For me, it's more about making a meaning of the context and making the making the meaning of all these dialects all together.
Okay. One more question. Question? Anyone? Yeah, please.
Just a small question. I'm very curious. So, do you know how to pronounce the Minnan Guanhua?
No.
No. Okay. Because I'm from Taiwan. As I know, there's few people knows how to pronunciate the Minnan Guanhua perfectly. Yeah. Right now in this moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So because you just mentioned that, so I'm really curious. Just a small question.
Yeah. For me, I just learn from the instrumentalists because they do that.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Okay, then thank you too. We are very excited about tomorrow.